I've told this story maybe 4 times in 2 years. Never once got through it without stopping somewhere in the middle. My name is Nuries. I'm 61. I spent 30 years as a district nurse in Cardiff, and I don't cry easily. Ask anyone. I've held people's hands while they died. I've told mothers things no mother should hear. You build a shell in that job. It's not that you stop feeling. You just learn to feel it later at home with the telly on and nobody watching. That shell cracked outside Buckingham Palace on a Tuesday in July, in front of about 200 strangers. And it wasn't the blood that did it, it was his back. Let me set it out properly because the details matter. They always matter. It was one of those London days where the heat sits on you like a wet coat. 29 degrees, no wind, that gray-white sky that isn't cloud and isn't sun, just glare. The tarmac had that shimmer. You could smell hot dust and somebody's sun cream and the diesel from a coach that had been idling on Constitution Hill for 20 minutes. I was there with my sister, Carrie's. She'd come down for a hospital appointment, and she wanted to do something normal after, which for Carrie's meant standing in a crowd looking at a building she'd already seen 4 times. The crowd was thick against the railings, phones up everywhere. A hen party in matching pink, a Spanish school group, a father with a toddler on his shoulders who kept shouting "Soldier Man" every 11 seconds. I timed it. That's the sort of thing you notice when you're stuck standing still. And behind the ironwork doing his job was a guard. Bearskin, red tunic buttoned to the throat, rifle, boots polished so hard they threw the sky back at you. He stood in that little sentry position they hold, absolutely still, chin level, eyes on nothing. I remember thinking, God love him in this heat. That was my only thought about him. He was scenery. That's the honest truth, and it's the part that shames me. He was scenery to me, like the gates and the statue and the flags. A photograph people take and put on the internet and forget. I noticed the first thing at about 10 past 12. His hands. There's a way they hold the rifle locked steady part of the body. His right hand kept opening, just slightly, fingers spreading then closing again. Once, twice, like a man testing whether his hand still belonged to him. I nudged Carrie. She said, "Leave off, he's fine." Then his shoulders went. Not a lot. A drop of maybe an inch and a slow shift of weight from one boot to the other and back. Anyone else would have missed it, but I've watched people go down. I've watched them for 3 decades. There's a look that comes before a faint, and it isn't dramatic. It's a stillness that's the wrong kind of still. It's the body starting to negotiate. His face had gone the color of candle wax. Under the chin strap, a line of sweat was running down his jaw and dripping onto the red wool of his collar, and the wool was drinking it up and going dark. I said out loud to no one, "He's going." A lad in front of me turned round with his phone. "You what?" "He's going to drop." The lad laughed and turned back and lifted his phone higher, and that's when the guard's knees folded. It's ugly, that's what nobody tells you. In films, people faint like flowers closing. In life, a big man in heavy kit goes down like something falling off a lorry. He hit the stone with his shoulder first, and his bearskin went one way, and the rifle clattered, and the sound of it, metal on stone, cut through all that crowd noise like a slap. 200 phones came up. 200. Straight up all at once in this horrible little wave, and there was a sound from the crowd that I will hear until the day I die. It wasn't a scream. It was a kind of excitement, the sound people make at fireworks. And I thought, God help me, I thought. He's 22 years old, and this will be on the internet before he wakes up. Then I was climbing over the barrier. I'm 61 and I've a bad hip, and I don't remember deciding anything. Carrie shouted my name. Somebody grabbed at my cardigan. There was a police officer running from the left and another guard breaking position from somewhere behind, boots hammering, and I got there first because I was closest, and I went down on my knees on stone that was hot enough to burn through my trousers. Up close he was a boy. That's what got me. freckles across his nose, a tiny nick on his chin from shaving, 2 spots on his forehead where the strap had rubbed. Just a boy in a costume that weighed more than my grandson. He was breathing fast and shallow, and his skin was dry when it should have been pouring, and that dry skin is the thing that frightens me more than blood ever has. "Sir, can you hear me? Can you tell me your name?" His eyes opened. They rolled, found me, didn't hold. "Ridley," he said, or that's what I heard. "Corporal, I have to." He tried to get up. Actually tried. Got one elbow under himself, and I put my hand flat on his chest, and I have never in my life felt a man that determined to stand on legs that would not hold him. "You're not going anywhere, love. Stay down." "I have to stand up," he said, and there was something in the way he said it, not pride, fear. The police officer reached us. Then his sergeant, older, silver at the temples, absolutely calm, the sort of calm that comes from having seen everything twice. He knelt on the other side and said, Danny, look at me. It's done. You're finished for today." Paramedics came through the crowd in under 3 minutes. 2 of them, a woman with cropped gray hair and a lad barely older than the boy on the ground. She took one look at him and said the words I knew were coming. "We need this off, all of it now. Here's the thing about that uniform. It is not a jacket. It's a red tunic that fits like a bandage, brass buttons, hooks at the collar, and under it a shirt, and under that a vest, and the whole thing is designed to make a man look like a monument. It does not come off quickly, not on a man who can't sit up." She got her shears out. And the boy, half-conscious, gray, lying on stone in front of 200 phones, grabbed her wrist. "No," he said, "not here." "Sweetheart, you're overheating. This is coming off." "Not here." He was crying. That's the bit I don't tell people usually. He was crying and trying to hold his own tunic shut with fingers that couldn't grip. Please, not with all of them looking. His sergeant leaned right down to his ear and said something I only half caught. I think it was, "Nobody's looking at you, son. They're looking at us." And he took off his own tunic and held it up like a curtain, and he shouted at the crowd, the only time that man raised his voice, "PHONES down." Nobody put their phone down. Not one. They cut him out of it. Shears up the back seam, brass buttons popping and skittering across the stone. And one rolled and stopped by my knee, and I picked it up without thinking, and I've still got it in a drawer at home. Red wool falling open. Then the shirt. Then the vest, and they rolled him onto his side to get it clear of his shoulders, and his bare back came out into that flat white light in front of everybody. And the crowd went silent. I mean silent, 200 people. That toddler stopped shouting. The whole of the mall seemed to stop. Because running down that boy's spine, from the base of his neck to the small of his back, following the line of the bone, was a column of names. Tattooed, small, plain letters, black, no decoration, no design. Just names one under the other like a list. Like something written in a ledger by someone with a steady hand. 11 of them. And under the last name, a single line of numbers, a date. The paramedic stopped with her hand in the air. The young lad said, "Oh," very quietly, the way you'd say it if someone stood on your foot. And the sergeant, still holding his tunic up as a curtain, looked down at that boy's back with an expression I have never been able to describe. Like a man reading something in a language he wished he'd never learned. "Afghanistan," he said, to himself, not to us. I've thought 1,000 times about why nobody photographed it. They could have 200 phones and the shot of the century right there on the stone, and I actually watched arms come down. One, then another, then rows of them. A woman in a sun hat turned her phone face down against her chest like she was hiding something shameful. The lad who'd laughed at me put his in his pocket and stood there with his hands hanging. Something about a list of names on a boy's spine. You can gawp at a soldier fainting. It's harder to gawp at grief with a shape. He was fine in the end. Heat exhaustion fluids out of hospital the same evening. I know that because I made a nuisance of myself on the phone until somebody took pity and told me. But that isn't the end of it. Because while they were getting him onto the stretcher, an old woman pushed through to the front of the barrier. 80 easily, cream coat, far too warm for the day, handbag held in both hands in front of her like a shield. She had that London face, the one that's been through everything and doesn't advertise it. She was staring at his back, at the names. And she said not loudly, "That's my son." Nobody moved. Third one down. Her chin was going, "T. Marsh Thomas, that's my Thomas." The sergeant turned round, and I watched a man in shirt sleeves, in the middle of the worst hour of his working year, cross the pavement to a stranger and take both her hands and hold them. She said, "Why has he got my son on his back?" And the boy on the stretcher, Danny, half gone, tubes in his arm, eyes barely open, heard her. God knows how. He turned his head. He said, "Because I was there, Mrs. Marsh." That was it, 4 words in her name. She made a sound I have heard exactly twice in my life, both times on a ward at 3 in the morning. Her legs went and 2 strangers caught her, a young man in a football shirt and a girl with pink hair, and they held her up between them, and nobody in that crowd said one word. They wanted to load him in. He wouldn't go. 30 seconds, he said. "Sarge, 30 seconds." They wheeled him to the barrier. He couldn't sit up. He got his hand out, that same hand I'd watched opening and closing all morning, and she took it in both of hers and pressed it to her face and stood there bent over him. He said he went back for 2 of us. That's why he's on there. He didn't have to. She said, "I know what he did. They told me what he did." And then, breaking, nobody said his name to me in 9 years. 9 years. She'd been coming to that spot every July, she told me afterwards on the date, because it was the closest thing she had to a place. There's a grave, but she can't manage the journey. So she came to the palace and stood at the railings and looked at the boys in red who were the same age he'd been, and went home again. And on the one day the whole thing broke apart, the heat, the fall, the shears, 200 phones, she got to see her son's name written on a living boy. They took him away. She wouldn't let go of the barrier for a good while, and my sister Carrie's, who'd said leave off, he's fine, stood with her arm round a woman she'd never met for 20 minutes without saying anything at all. Somebody found the bearskin, somebody else collected the buttons, I kept one, I've told you that. The Spanish schoolteacher was crying. The hen party had gone quiet, and one of them was fanning the old woman with a map. That lad with the phone came and asked me, very seriously, whether the guard was going to be all right, and I said yes, and he nodded about 6 times and walked off to be young somewhere else. And the pavement where he'd fallen was just pavement. Nothing to see. 20 minutes later the crowd reformed at the railings and a fresh sentry took the post, still as a statue, chin level, eyes on nothing, and the tourists lifted their phones. Scenery again. I think about that word, scenery. I think about how many of them we walk past, in the red coats and out of them, on buses, in queues, standing outside a palace in 29 degrees, holding themselves upright, and we photograph them the way you'd photograph a postbox. There was a whole cemetery on that boy's back, and I'd stood 10 feet from it for an hour and a half and thought about my hip. They stripped him bare in front of 200 strangers on the hottest day of the year. He begged them not to. He was more frightened of that than of the ground coming up at him. And when it was done, when the red wool was cut away and there was nothing left to hide behind, what everybody saw wasn't a body at all. It was 11 men, carried up and down that same stretch of pavement every single day by someone young enough to be my grandson, in silence under a coat where nobody was ever meant to look. Some men wear their medals on their chest. That one wore his on his spine.